So I feel like I'm saying this at the start of every upload, but I love the Steam Deck, and aside from the Nintendo Switch, it's definitely my favourite handheld behind the original Game Boy Color. But what do I recommend playing as specifically a mid-30s gamer? Well, I have you covered with some cozy games, some intense FPS games, and I think some stuff that you'll resonate and like. So let's get into it. Before then though, how about you subscribe to the channel? It really helps me out. It signifies to me that you want to see more Steam Deck content, hopefully some handheld content later down the line, as SteamOS is bleeding out into more hardware, specifically that Legion Go, which I'm really interested in seeing how that handles basically all of my handheld gaming needs. And maybe we'll have a video of that in future. But yeah, subscribe to the channel and get more content like this. Let's start off with my last recent obsession, which is Dave the Diver. And I say last because I actually stopped playing this in January because I completed it. I'll fire it up every now and again because, well, the game's absolutely awesome and I'm surprised at how good it has been. And I was actually really coy on this ahead of time, I must admit, but I'm not really too fussed about 2D or 2.5D side-scrolling type games anymore. I have to say I had my fill of those during the 90s when I was a kid, and so it takes a lot for me to pick one of these style games up and really get into it, maybe save the Pokemon games. My actual partner was playing the living shit out of this game on the PlayStation 5, and she's not much of a gamer herself, and I saw her playing it. I thought, well, I may as well give it a go here on the Steam Deck. And pun intended here, I was absolutely hooked. The 3D-ish, I think it's 3D-ish or 2.5D-ish pixel art style, the gorgeous colours, the animation style, and the setting, they're absolutely perfect for this handheld. The gameplay, I think, is really simple by most modern game standards. In fact, it actually could do with a little more work in the oven. It's a little bit like Root Beer Tapper had a child with Echo the Dolphin and threw in a little bit of Abzu as well for that underwater exploration. To be honest, that sounds awful when I start to think about it, but you play as Dave, he's the diver, who runs a sushi shop and does a little side quests that eventually lead to a sort of Atlantis-type civilization. To be honest, I'm about 12 hours into the game now. I've more or less completed the main story, and it's still really addictive when I fire it up. For the sake of about £10 from online stores, I think it's well worth a punt, and I thought I would absolutely hate this game, and take it from me, I can't stop playing it, or at least I didn't stop playing it. So I think that speaks volumes. It's really set up as well for short bursts of play because you don't play them out in missions, you just do them as dives and they turn into missions. And yeah, it's a really good game. I think you should go pick this up. This is definitely my first pick, but my next pick is a little bit more obvious. What can I say about Balatro that probably hasn't already been said? It is the most addictive game I've ever played, probably. Maybe save some of the older Pokemon games when I was a child. So much so, in fact, that this has basically become a Balatro machine for me, at least my Steam Deck has. In basic terms, this is just poker, but on steroids, and if those steroids were on steroids on opioids themselves. So yeah, another bad explanation, but it's just really, really addictive. So effectively, you're just trying to make poker hands, but the rules are constantly being bent, broken, and rewritten by, I'd say, a chaotic collection of jokers. I know that sounds really cringe, but it just gives you some absurd bonuses and really adds to the gameplay loop that you're going to have. They call this a roguelike, but I just think it's just a really fun game. One joker, for instance, that you might add to your deck might turn all of your 2s into wildcards, so you can play them as any suit, for instance. Another might give you points for having admittedly terrible hands, and that's really the tip of the iceberg, because I can't really get into the full ins and outs of Balatro. Go check out the subreddit, it's a really good place for memes and gameplay information. It's more of a lifestyle though, this game, than for me at this point, and it's tough to put down once you've played it, and I have this on multiple devices, so yeah, I think that again speaks volumes. It's super cheap, super fun to set up and get out, play on the go, and it's one of those games you can just dip in and out of really quickly, play a few hands, and you get hooked. So a lot of people that have watched my previous Steam Deck content have constantly asked about this game on screen now, and this is called Sable. It's easily my most played game of the past year, save Dave the Diver. It's just simply gorgeous, and I'd really liken it to Breath of the Wild. If you really like the Zelda games, it's a lot like that, but without the combat elements, and definitely a more relaxed atmosphere and a slightly different art style to boot. Basically, you just play as Sable, who's a young girl who's more or less finding a way in the world, and you find your way in this world that has lots of different biomes and mechanics as a result of those biomes. I do think the climbing here is just basically a straight rip-off of Zelda with an almost identical stamina bar, which you do increase by collecting extras in the game. I've collected all of them now, so I can't show them on screen. I think the killer feature though is the glider and the fact that you have this almost like gliding air bubble technique. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called the gliding, or maybe that's the actual, it doesn't matter what it's called. Basically you can glide to the ground in a red bubble, and that saves you from falling really high heights. There's also the hover scooter, or whatever you want to call it, hover bike. Yeah, hover bike. this is the best part of this game. My only trepidation in fully giving this game a complete and utter seal of approval, specifically for the Steam Deck though, is sometimes you'll get slightly, it's not even slightly, it's big frame drops in busy areas when you zip through areas using that hover bike or that hovercraft. For the most part, I do think when you dial down those graphical settings and graphical details, it helps, but I'm not really sure if I want to suggest you doing that because this is a gorgeous game and you want to see it in its entirety. I can't recommend the game itself highly enough, really, to be honest. It's not necessarily action-packed. It's just a really chill game that I think is the ultimate cozy, relaxing game. And if there's any game on this list that you go out and pick up, please go out and pick up Sable. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's definitely unlike anything else out there, and I really do give it more than a full seal of approval. I'll give it 2 seals of approval. I think, though, if you like graphically astute games, you may have seen Control, and genuinely this is the best looking game I've personally played on Steam Deck. There may be better games out there, but as far as I'm concerned, the games that I've played in my library, this is fantastic, and by far and away one of those games you want to show off how good the Steam Deck can look. I personally love the Alan Wake series. I've completed them a long time ago, and I think Control is actually set in the same universe, so that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in it. It's just a really cool take on third-person shooters because you add in telekinetic powers on top of a customizable gun, although you do only have the one gun that you can customize. It's a really strange game, but it's something, it's hard to explain, it's just really fun to play. To me, though, the details in the levels and the particle effects, they're absolutely insane, and yeah, this is one of those recent-ish, I think it was released back in 2018 or 2019, I'm not actually sure off the top of my head. It's one of those games that you do need to tone down the graphical settings to get a really good experience because it can devolve into a slideshow at times if you don't optimize or tweak it, especially for hardware like the Steam Deck. I also think it's not quite as pick up and play as some of my other favorite games that I've listed here so far in this video, because the save system, to be polite, is a little bit funky, but I will say exploring the uber detailed oldest house, I think that the building's called in the game, more than makes up for that. It's easily one of the most visually impressive games on the deck by a substantial margin, so if you want graphical options and a really good story and something that's slightly different from what you might have played before, definitely check out Control. It's a lot cheaper than it used to be, and you can pick up this often in Steam sales for under £5, $5, something like that. So Journey is one of those games that I've played through multiple times on PlayStation 3, I think on PlayStation 4 as well, but it's a funny one. Although it is basically over a decade old at this point, it doesn't run perfectly on a Steam Deck. You do have to tune down some of the graphic settings. I think it's something to do with the sand, basically how the physics of the sand in this game to get a truly stable 45 FPS and above, or at least that's what I've had to do. You might not have the same experience. I don't know why. It seems to vary from person to person who I've asked. Either way, it's just one of those experience games, and I say experience because the actual gameplay and the puzzles are practically child's play. It's definitely not a hard game, but it's a game that you experience it. And it's one of those awesome games that I think is super cheap. It's really cozy. You don't have to worry about too much. There are enemies in the game, but they're not necessarily enemies that you would be worried about. It's not scary in that respect. It's a really cheap title, and it doesn't take longer than maybe an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and a half to complete. So if you do want something that you can just experience, like I say, an hour and a half, boom, you've got a game that you've completed, really fun, playable as well, really playability is quite high with this one as well, so definitely check it out if you haven't already tested it, tried it, played it on any of the platform. So I said I've played Sable for a long time. I think it's nearly 100 hours at this point, and since I completed the game, more or less completed it 100%, I've been looking for something a little bit more immersive. Someone suggested me that I try Cloudpunk on a subreddit somewhere. To be honest, it doesn't share a single resemblance with Sable, but it is a really cool, chill game that has a fantastic art style and really interesting story. I think it's a little bit like if Crazy Taxi had a kid with those Fifth Element taxis, and you basically just courier stuff to other characters, at least as far as the game I'm into. The 3D pixel art confused with some 3D styles as well is a really cool combination. It's just fun to turn your brain off, or one of those games that it's really fun to turn your brain off and play. The hover car controls are absolutely awesome. You can go in 3 directions. Every single direction. It's a 3D. You can go up and down, left, right, whatever you need to do. It's just a really moody cyberpunk atmosphere thrown in as well. I've loved it so far, and I'm really excited to see where the story progresses. And it's one of those games I can already give it a seal of approval after playing it for 2 or 3 hours. So yeah, check that one out if you like the cyberpunk setting. You want something that will definitely run like a dream on the Steam Deck with those 3D pixel arts. A really strange combo. Definitely want to check out. Donut County is another cool game as well that I think basically feels like a polished version of those. Do you remember those itch.io city swallowing games that you see on crappy adverts somewhere? It's like one of them, but it's really, really highly polished. It's just a really short, sweet, puzzly type title that, again, you switch your brain off to play. It isn't difficult, but it really looks good while it's doing it. The story, I can take it or leave it, but it's super cheap, quick to complete, and I love the colourful art style, and that's something I really like, and hopefully you're seeing that with these games that I've suggested to you. Colourful art styles on a OLED screen particularly look amazing. I think that is something I have a real love for, and it's something I think you will too if you do try this out for yourself. It is an Xbox title as well, but I picked this up on the Steam store, and I think it's well worth a couple of hours of your time. So my final choice for someone who is brand new to Steam Deck or is getting into games on Steam Deck, wants something to play. Personally, I love old school FPS titles, well, because I'm getting old, and the Halo Master Chief Collection I think is perfectly at home on the Steam Deck. It's not something I would necessarily play on my gaming PC. It's something that I want to play on my Steam Deck. So yeah, it's a strange dichotomy, but it's a really, really good value product because you get 6 games in one here. So you pick this up for under £10 during a Steam sale, and you're effectively set for a long time to come because some of these can take 10, 12 hours to complete the actual main story, and there's online play as well. Not that I'd suggest playing it on this device. I'm playing through the first Halo again, and I have to say it's amazing how well it's aged. I know there's some graphical upgrades here, but it's just the perfect intro to old school FPS titles, and I think you'll really love this if you do like first person shooters and you want something, maybe you're a little bit younger, you want something different, you're a little bit older like me, you're in your mid-30s, you can relive some of the classics, and there's a lot of classics in this collection. Yeah, I think that's basically covers some of the games that I'm absolutely obsessed with on the Steam Deck. Some games that hopefully, if you've maybe not thought about before, you've seen them on the Steam store and you're like, I don't know if it's worth a go. Genuinely, I can give all of these my full seal of approval. There are some that I've omitted from this list. There's a few games that I was like, I'm not really sure if people would be really too happy to play them. And yeah, sometimes performance is not necessarily one of those things that you're going to get the best of when you're playing on the Steam Deck. There's some obvious games like Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 5, you can play them, but these are ones that you maybe wouldn't necessarily know about, and I wanted to share them with you. If you have any games of your own that you're really interested in, by all means, share those down in the comment sections below. I'm really interested to see what other people are playing, because I think with the Steam Deck you can get into this kind of titles you wouldn't necessarily play. I think for me, Hades is high on my list of, it's on my shopping list, it's on my wish list, and I'll probably pick that up at some point and try and get into that because it looks fantastic, and I've heard it runs fantastic on the deck as well. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, hopefully this will give you some ideas of games that you might necessarily have overlooked. Yeah, thanks for spending some time with me today, and I'll speak to you later.